Starting to work. It's working. All right. This is Rocco Jerome.
Hello, Josephine.
What's that?
I said, hello, Josephine.
Yeah, right on. We got James Porter on the line. What's going on, James? How you feeling?
Living my life out here in Chicago, and it's raining as we speak. I can hear the raindrops right outside the windowsill.
Yeah, and you got a little bit of coffee you were saying right before you started rolling. So the listeners are just going to have to. They're just going to have to
be as suave as I can be. Lord knows how long that will last, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, they'll just have to live with it, man.
Yeah.
So James, it's good that we're friends. It took a long time for us to become friends, and all of our mutual friends, they thought we already had because we like a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. I mean, I never will forget. I mean, your name has been coming up, and I know you wrote for a few Chicago rockabilly fanzines.
I did.
I want to say Holler.
I did.
You were doing that, right?
I did that. I wrote for Review. There may have been others that I'm forgetting that'll get me in trouble if they listen to this. But yeah, I was always I've always been a big part of my heart has belonged to the Chicago rockabilly scene since I was just a kid, and yeah, it's a great thing. I'm glad that it exists and that it seems to be thriving.
Yeah, sure. I mean, those are my friends, so of course, hometown pride and all.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. When did ask a really loaded question? At what point in your life did you know that music was going to be a big part of it for you?
When I got my first record player for my 5th birthday.
Nice, very good.
It was a GE portable stereo.
That's excellent. Yeah.
And my first record was a Jackson 5 LP.
Ah, that's good. Which one?
Looking Through the Windows.
Yeah, that's great. Right on, man.
Yeah, 1970, whenever.
Yeah, whenever that was.
1972, I'll say it, no big deal.
Yeah, I think 72. That sounds about right for that.
Yeah.
Was that an automatic thing for you, or were you into soul at that point, or was it just that was the popular thing?
I was into soul music. I mean, at that point, that early in the game, I was still kind of sorting out my tastes. But I think my parents kind of noticed, a little. I mean, I liked toys and cartoons and whatnot a lot when I was a kid, but they also noticed that I kind of gravitated towards music.
Yeah.
So, my father would be playing his blues and country records on the RCA console in the basement, and my mother would be listening to Aretha Franklin. And whenever that thing started going around, it's kind of kind of grabbed me.
Yeah.
So they got me a record player for a birthday, and I gravitated towards soul. I think my first records would have been the Jackson 5, the OJ's Backstabbers LP, James Brown, whoever was popular back in 72, 73. I think that's kind of going on down to that. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's a great time to be buying records.
It was. I sure wish I was maybe 10 to 15 years older, so I would have known enough to buy the more obscure stuff. But
sure. Yeah.
But the hits were so brilliant that,
Yeah. That's always a thing of it's if only you could have been a little bit more cognizant of what was happening. Or if you could have been a little bit older to have seen some other stuff. But that's still pretty righteous, man. There's a lot of great things.
When I was a kid, my mother used to, when we'd go to Woolworths, she'd leave little JP by the records, and I knew enough that I'd buy the stuff that I knew, say, Ray Charles or a Motown record or something.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of LPs that I saw, that were obscure as hell. I didn't know enough to buy them, but I remembered those covers.
Yeah.
And when I got old enough to be searching out obscurities, I'm like, wait a minute, that's that LP with the crazy covers I saw at Walgreens back in Woolworths back in 1975.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, if time travel were ever possible, boy, I'd just go to a Woolworths record bin and buy half the records for myself. Of course, I have those records, but now probably half the records for eBay, and I sell them.
Yeah. Yeah. All of a sudden, just a big bevy of mint records shows up on eBay. You just call it a warehouse find, right?
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, I don't think those really happen anymore. I once saw an article, Cream magazine, that was a rock magazine I was growing up.
Oh, yeah.
And they had Elton John on the cover, okay?
Yeah.
And all the pictures, I think somehow or another, Elton went to some record warehouse in Detroit or somewhere, and he found all these Motown records. They showed him getting all these sealed LPs from the 60s, right out of the box.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this in the 80s and thinking, damn, that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Elton was a big record geek too. There's a great documentary about Tower Records that's on Netflix, I think, and they talk about how he used to go to the Tower Records early in the morning every Tuesday, and he would buy all the new records that he was interested in. And for the stuff that he liked, he would buy multiple copies because he needed them for his car and for his yacht or whatever and his multiple homes, so that he would be able to have them all in hand.
When you're that rich, boy, you can buy the world.
Yeah, right. You know, I mean, he was...
I still got to give it to Elton. I mean, I never was a big Elton John fan, but I always liked musicians who were into music. I mean, not a lot of people are. You'd be surprised. I mean, like, there are a lot of musicians, particularly the stars, they're really only into, like, what's on the radio so they can keep up with everything, so they can, like, you know, have a hit the next time out.
Right, yeah.
They won't be left behind by the trends. But Elton, I mean, he seems to be into stuff that, he was kind of like you and me. He seems to be like, you know, a collector who likes music, period.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like, you know, he's not trying to, like, keep up with the trends so he won't be left behind. He's, like, buying this stuff because he genuinely likes it, you know, and that, I can always relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's a beautiful thing, man. You know, you always feel a certain kinship when you kind of find that out. I think, you know, that they're on the same team as us. You know.
Yeah, I'm going to flip the script a little bit, and I'm going to ask you a loaded question.
Yeah.
When did Rocco Jerome know the music was going to be a big factor in his life?
You know, I think that the moment which it was clear that it was going to be a really big deal for me, it was right around the holiday season. When I was maybe like 12 or 13, and I'd always liked music, but we weren't really a family that messed around too much with records or cassette tapes. Then I don't think CDs were a thing yet, really.
Yeah.
But my dad got the blue Beatles collection, you know, the one that's the later half years of the Beatles for Christmas. Yeah. And we listened to it every day for a few days. And then I remember that it was like maybe the first day that we gone back to school after the Christmas break had wrapped up. And I came home and I wanted to listen to the Beatles. And my dad was like, I don't want to listen to the Beatles right now. I want to watch Andy Griffith. And so I just sat by the Marantz receiver, which now belongs to me, and I put on some headphones and was listening to the Beatles. And I remember my mom was making dinner, and she came into the living room and kind of motioned at me, you know, to my dad, and my dad kind of shrugged, like, that's just what he wants to do. And that was kind of the moment that I realized that music was going to be a bigger deal to me than it was to my parents and to most people, that it was going to be a thing that was always going to be important to me. And that it meant a little bit more to me than most people. You know, that the whole thing of just whatever somebody's into, if they've got that sort of that, for lack of a better word, that geek, I guess, enthusiast mentality, you know, it's a different thing. It's a different thing for you, you know?
Yeah, it is. I mean, and also, too, one thing I noticed, I mean, I was probably more of a teenager as a child than I was the actual teenager, because when I was a kid, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old, I'm practically a newborn baby, and everything's new to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I pretty much liked everything new, you know, soul-wise that was, like, coming out, right? I got to rock later on.
Yeah.
But everything new soul-wise, but I think what got me into, like, white rock music was, like, say, listening to the oldie station.
Right, absolutely. Right, yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think maybe I probably told you before, I mean, it's like, there was an automated oldie station in Chicago called WFYR.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to listen to that station sort of as a goof. I mean, not that I was necessarily in the music, but I always had to think, like, nostalgia, because when I was coming up, that was when, like, the first 50s revival was, like, really starting to happen.
Yeah, in the 70s,
you know?
Sure.
And, you know, all of that, you know, like American Graffiti and Let the Good Times Roll, and, you know, I mean, all these rock and roll revivals and whatnot.
Yeah.
And Chuck Berry was kind of having a comeback, you know, and that kind of intrigued me from a distance. And I started listening to WFYR, this oldie station, just kind of as a group. I mean, it was cool because I got to hear, like, the older soul songs that I missed, you know, but also to listen to stuff that, like, I thought was kind of corny and quaint in a lot of ways. You know, it's like, ha, 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 the devil bike. You know, I'm like, ho, 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 the grassroots. next thing you know, I'm walking to school and I got like the grassroots song playing in my head, you know, and it kind of crept up on me. And it really, really, I told you about buying records of Woolworths earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
It really hit me when, again, we're back at Woolworths. Okay, I keep wanting to say Walgreens, but, you know, Woolworths.
Yeah.
We're back at Woolworths, you know, on like a spring day in 1976. I'm there with my mom. She's alone by the records, you know, and as a wild hair, you know what I decided to buy? 8-year-old black kid in 1976. You know what I decided to buy? Roy Orbison's Greatest Hits. You know, I bought that, and I bought that in this Oldies but Goodies compilation, Golden Goodies of 19.
Oh, I know those. Yeah.
I bought those two albums that day, and that opened up a brand new world for me musically.
Man, I haven't thought about those compilations in years, those Oldies but Goodies. And there was so many volumes of those. And they had like purple, yellow, green covers.
Right, Oldies but Goodies, and there was another one called Golden Goodies.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I guess, you know, by me being an experienced collector by now, it's like I have a few of them, but not all of them, because they're pretty common songs. They've been compiled on other records.
Yeah, sure.
They're pretty cool as far as like starter kits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For anybody like 50s and 60s rock and roll.
Well, and they're that type of deal where once you get used to that song order, you'll always expect to hear the next song, right?
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
You know that deal. Or it's like some compilation, and you know this is where you expect to hear Bebop Lula because you just heard Johnny B. Good or whatever it is.
Exactly. You know, if you hear like a certain song, you expect to turn over the record.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great thing.
Feeling I get all the time. You know. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you're experimenting with different types of stuff. That's good. You know, I mean, I've always said that you can understand any culture if you can understand the music of the culture. There's just so much that is right in the grooves of all types of music. And one of my other chestnuts is that music is like food, and you wouldn't just eat one kind of food all the time. You wouldn't just eat egg salad sandwiches for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another thing too, I mean, music, I mean, if you're a foodie, you know, you're into stuff that's like, you know, might be a little exotic, but it appeals to you. You're not into it because it's bad.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's really funny. I mean, I had like, this hasn't happened to me often in life, but two significant times when it happened. I mean, once I used to work in a record store, you know, and there were a lot of people who shopped at the record store with like hip hop and whatnot, and they would be like, James, how come you not have the Mary J. Blige like the rest of us? How can you just have Slim Harpo crap, you know? You know, what is this Little Richard stuff you listen to, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I don't begrudge anybody's musical tastes, but also, too, I mean, it's like, I mean, of course, I mean, I was used to it when I was like in high school. That's when everybody was like really, really, you know, concerned about buying whatever was new.
Right.
You know, but by this time I'm in my early 20s, and here's like people who are like in their early 30s, and they're buying the new stuff just to be hip.
Right.
And they can't fathom that anybody would like, you know, go off the charts and just buy like, you know, anything that appeals to them randomly.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And somewhere down the line, I used to have a girlfriend, you know, who thought that she'd always scold me that, you know, that me and my collector friends were elitists because we wouldn't want to listen to everything that everybody else likes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And that's not really, I don't get that. You know, I mean, it's like I mean, music is there for the taking, and it's kind of like I've said before. It's like I try not to have conversations about music with people who only believe there's two kinds of music, old and new. Indeed, yeah. I don't break it down like that, brother. I
mean, yeah. You're better off to just avoid the subject if that's the way that you're leaning. You know.
Yeah, more like good and bad. That's a whole other thing altogether.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I, you know, when I was a young guy, you know, like a kid growing up, I was always into older music, and the thing was that it gave me a certain strength. I always felt like, you know, there was a bigger world that I was a part of because I understood this music, and you know, I used to go around high school looking like a 50s juvenile delinquent. That's how bitten by that bug I was. I had the big pompadour. Before I knew there was a scene anywhere, before I even knew there was anybody else doing it, it's just what I was wanting to do. I was moved to do it from hearing, Link Ray for the first time and Getting Heavy and all that sorts of stuff.
Now, when was this?
This was in the 90s. Yeah, you've got a few years on me. I wasn't born until 78. But, it was a big deal for me. And I always knew that it made it so that being into music and having that, it always let me know that there was something out there for me. And I never worried as a result of that.
Yeah, pretty much same here. I gravitated towards old music too, but it wasn't because I thought I was born too late or any stuff like that. It wasn't like, a kind of like nostalgia for a time that I didn't miss. It was none of that at all.
Yeah.
It's just that, I like a lot of new music too, but it's just that I never liked the fact that I had to choose.
Right. No.
It where it hits you, and it doesn't matter whether it's like something just came out last week, or something I found in a dollar bin, a week ago that came out 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yep.
It never was like, any kind of like, triggered, never triggered any kind of nostalgia impulses for me. Unlike you, I was into a lot of old stuff too as a teenager. I kind of knew that there was that I wasn't alone because, first of all, it's like, when punk rock happened, like in the mid to late 70s,
yeah,
it's forgotten now. But at the time, it was kind of understood that, a lot of punk and new wave took off from 50s and 60s R&B.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And when I first heard bands like the Ramones, I was thinking to myself, this is kind of like the stuff I heard on the oldie station, only with the amps turned up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit more dinged up, a little bit more stripped down, but still same thing.
Like, I knew that that there were newer bands playing this kind of thing. Of course, me being like a teenager, there was nobody in my immediate social circle, who was into it as deeply as I was. I had to wait till college for that.
Yeah.
But it's like, I kind of knew just from reading fanzines, reading music magazines that, that there were others who were into this stuff like me, and they related to it on an aesthetic level, not a nostalgia level.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea, the aesthetic over the nostalgic. Because when you put it right down too, we didn't live through that. We just have like ideas that we developed from photos or eyewitness accounts in some respects, but it's not really about trying to be like a Civil War reenactor as much as it's just a feeling that you have and that you just run with it.
Right, and let's face facts here. It's like, as great as the music from that time was, I don't know if I want to live in that time because I'm a child of my time.
Yeah, man.
There's a lot of stuff in the 50s and 60s that I couldn't relate to.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't want to go back to. There are freedoms that we all have that were not there
all
those years ago.
I dig it.
But if I could get like the music, and the aesthetics behind that, I know you have to kind of live in the time to really have that kind of frame of mind. But
right.
Like I said, it's like music hits you the way it hits you, and everything has to have a techno beat behind it. I'll be damned if everything else still have a techno beat behind it. But, it's kind of like that. It's like, as you know, I have a radio show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you don't mind me plugging it.
No, please do. That's the whole name of the game.
It's called the Hoodoo Party on WLUW.org. That's 88.7 on the FM dial if you're anywhere in the Chicago vicinity. And I play like older rock and roll from like roughly 1950 1967, but I also play like newer artists in the same vein, like Nicky Hill, or Bloodshot Bill, and I'm always careful not to use the word oldies on my show.
Yeah, no, I don't want to go there.
I say vintage rock and roll, or early rock and roll.
Yeah.
Because that's the way they do it in jazz. It's like there are people who listen to traditional jazz, but it's not like, hey, let's go back to the 1950s and pretend we're in the Village Vanguard, or sipping espresso in a coffee house.
Right.
It's just kind of like, hey, let's appreciate the music, and that's kind of where I'm coming from with the older rock and roll that I play. I don't consider it like a malt shop oldies but goodies kind of deal. I consider it like, hey, these like the earliest genres of rock and roll, and there's some real good music to be heard, and I'm exploiting a lot of the things that you don't hear on oldies radio, especially since now 50s and 60s kind of fallen out of the rotation.
Yeah, they
But,
truly have.
yeah.
They truly have, and it's
Yeah.
sad to see. You know, if I make it to being an old guy, you know, the music that is my bread and butter will be largely forgotten. The same way music from, you know, the 1940s. You know, it's not on the radio now except for under specialty situations. One thing I wanted to talk about too, when you're talking about calling it whatever you're going to call it, I've had this theory that the genre classifications, and this is something that came from me running a music store and just dealing with this kind of thought process every day. The music genres, it really just sort of exists, in my opinion, for record labels to sell stuff to people, and for people to be able to put things into a handy box so they don't have to think about it too much. And one of the main things that makes me feel that way is the way that most artists that we think of as being jazz artists didn't even like the term jazz. They weren't into it. I just watched a documentary on Lee Morgan, and he talked about how he would have preferred to have called it black classical music. And, you know, Miles Davis was even more saccharine about it. He was like, you know, don't call it that. Don't talk to me about jazz. There is no jazz. And, you know, when you start to sort of try to move your mind out of that and try to just listen to music is just music, the same way that you don't need to classify every leaf that falls from a tree or, you know, every ray of sunshine.
I kind of partially disagree with that. I mean, on the one hand, I realize that not everything can be contained into a box, and musicians borrow from other genres all the time. Yet, by the same token, I guess if you're a customer at the record store, you know, and you're looking for something to spend, like, you know, $15.99 on,
right?
You know, I mean, you kind of want an idea, a general classification of what it is you're about to buy,
right?
Whether it's like something that you came in there looking for, whether it's something that you're not familiar with, but you might be able to get into it, you know. So, I mean, in that light, you know, I mean, like, genres do serve a purpose. And if you were to ask me to describe any artist at all, I don't think I could do it without, you know, doubling back to a genre, you know?
Yeah, there's really no way around it. And that's something that I've encountered writing about music, as I'm sure that you have too. Sometimes I feel like all I'm doing is just ripping off Cub Coda every time I turn around, you know? I feel like Cub Coda.
He was my favorite columnist in Goldmine magazine. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You know, and like all those liner notes that he got to before we did, and like Peter Guralnick, and who was the other one? I met him. I can't believe I can't think of his name. Nick Toshis and Lester Bangs, to me, those guys are like, I always felt like they were trying a little bit too hard to be the angry young man type guys.
Yeah, depending on what they were writing about. I've always said that Lester Bangs' best work was written when he took the lampshade off his head.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Because all everybody wants to know about Lester Bangs is that, you know, hey, this is a guy who got fights with Lou Reed, and here's the guy who invented punk rock, and here's the guy who got drunk at press parties. Record company, man, where to go, you know,
right.
Velvet Underground band, but there's more to it than that. I mean, I don't get obscure as hell right now, but I have a Rolling Stones like 1969, right?
Yeah.
Miles Davis on the cover. You know, I think some of Lester Bangs' best stuff was in that magazine. I mean, he did a whole piece on the box tops.
Wow.
You know, and this was before Alex Chilton was any kind of cult hero.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, you know, it's really funny. I mean, he admitted that the box tops were kind of like, you know, prefabricated top 40 teen band who were trying to go underground with their most recent record.
Yeah.
But he was perceptive enough to know there was some good music under that.
Right.
You know, and in the same issue, he wrote about the Bar-Kays, the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band.
Yeah.
You know, they're like these two self-contained funk bands, you know, and he was probably one of the first to see that, you know, funk was really black rock.
Yeah.
You know, and right, it's like, I mean, things like that. I mean, it's like, that's the Lester I want to see, not the guy who took, like, you know, 2 pills to sit up all night banging away on his typewriter 1,001 words about, you know, why Lou Reed is or isn't great. You know, I like Lou Reed, don't get me wrong, but that topic's kind of been overcooked right now.
Sure, yeah. Well, and once you start to buy into your own press, you know, it's a dangerous place to be, and I think that Lester got there.
Especially when you consider he was basically semi-homeless at the end of his life.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it.
That kind of neutralized him in my mind. I mean, that no, this cat ain't perfect. I can still like his stuff, but there was some things that, I kind of see him. I didn't know Lester as a person, but I kind of see how on the wrong day he could wear out his welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm still a fan after all that, but I'm just kind of looking at it just as a reflection of the way it really is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I don't dislike his work. I mean,
I sure don't either.
It's one of those things where I gotta kind of take a deep breath before I dive in. Yeah, I don't know. I always felt like, well, I haven't always felt this way, but in recent years, my approach to writing has been more and more to let the story serve the subject and not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I try to even eliminate I and me from the story entirely when I write. I don't feel like my place in the story even is a place. It's as an objective outsider as much as possible.
Exactly. I mean, done right. I've seen some articles where the journalists insert themselves in the story, and it kind of made it come to life.
Yeah.
But there's time and place for that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I don't want to be looked at it because I don't want to be considered. I mean, everybody's a butthole to somebody sometimes, but I don't want to be that guy. The guy that everybody talks about. He's so self-serving that he puts himself in everything he writes. This, that, the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand, man. That's always been my feeling. Who are you writing for lately?
I've been doing some stuff for the Reader.
That's cool.
And also a few other publications, including Rock and Roll Globe, which is a really good online publication. And as you know, I'm busy trying to finish up this book about Black Rock. Yeah. Yeah,
I've been following your progress on social media whenever you kind of chime in on that. How? Just a matter of like transcribing interviews at this point,
Yeah.
And
hoping that the tape came out well,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been there. That can be a really tough thing to do, to the degree that's part of why I have this podcast. Some of these interviews that are on the docket were things that I was going to write up, and I finally was just like, I'm just going to put this online. Let's put it out there and see what happens.
Oh yeah, who are you writing for?
Right now, I work for Tops, which is the magazine here in Louisville, and then I also do some really deep geek stuff, some comic book stuff for a British company called Eagle Moss, and they have a website that's called Hero Collector, and they pay you in pounds, and the transfer rate is really good. So that's something I'm very happy about. That's going pretty well for me.
Oh, it's nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna turn the tables once again and play interviewee, ask the interviewer.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on Stan Lee?
It's nice that he lived as long as he did to see things come to fruition. That was always his dream, was that there would be a bunch of movies based on the Marvel characters. I don't think he was a sinner. I don't think he was a saint. I do think that it was a very big deal that he gave credit to the artists as far as putting their names in the comics. It's always funny when people try to run him down and say that he didn't give enough credit, but I mean, he was the first one to give names of the artists. Jack Kirby's name first saw print in Marvel Comics. He gave it all the way down to the letterer, and he was a self-promoter, shamelessly so.
Which was good for the comic industry, I would say.
I totally agree. Yeah.
If you don't mind me interjecting here, I mean, it's like I was a big. I mean, I kind of got away from it when I was like, maybe 11 or 12, but I was a huge comic collector when I was a kid.
Oh, cool.
And just like as music fans, we look at like Sun and Motown and Stax, like these mythical labels that have like all these cool guys hanging out, and there's like one guy running all. That's sort of the way I felt about Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
That's how. Matter of fact, the first thing that as a child, my first conception of New York was the fact that that's where all the comic companies were located.
Yeah, for sure.
And I always kind of figured that if I ever make it out to New York, this is the 8-year-old me talking. I want to see if I could visit Marvel and DC and probably get some free swag out in the process. You know?
Go to the legendary bullpen and see if you can get in. See if you can get past Marie Severinsen at the door, right?
Oh,
or no, Flo Steinberg. Yeah.
She was a tough cookie, though, I heard.
Yeah. There's a great interview or story that somebody wrote. I'll have to send you the link. In the 70s about Marvel Comics, and the woman who wrote it was somebody that had worked for Marvel in some capacity. There's a lot of great insight in that. I'll have to send that to you.
It sounds like the Rolling Stone article, but they did a piece like that in 1971.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh yeah, that was incredible article. And what was that one guy? It might have been Jack Kirby. It was like somebody who was like on the bullpen who. I think he was like a handcuff artist. He could like wriggle his way out of a handcuff or something like that.
Oh, you're talking about Jim Steranko.
I haven't read that in a long time, but I remember him.
Yeah. Steranko is a real big deal for me. I'm actually friends with that guy.
Oh, he's still alive. That's
He was a relatively young guy. I think he just turned 75 in November.
Okay.
Yeah, he was
he was in baby boomer age. Yeah.
Yeah, he was an escape artist. And he got into comics from an early age, and he was actually working in an advertising agency in New York, and he loved comics enough that he took it on as a second job, and he would never let him boss him around. Was kind of his thing. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, he's a cool cat. I really enjoy that guy. I'm a big fan of his work. He's
I have a goofy story to tell about Jim Steranko, and possibly embarrassing too.
Yeah, go for it.
I used to draw cartoons, or try to draw cartoons when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And somehow or another, I'd read so many Marvel comics that I didn't think James Porter had the right ring to it.
Yeah.
You know what I call myself? Chris Steranko. I'd be drawing stuff like what did I have? I forget the superhero names I came up with, but it's like on a couple of those things, and I threw them way long ago, but I wasn't James Porter. I was Chris Steranko. That's a comic book guy name, you know?
That's great, man.
James Porter just threw
Yeah. Well, Stan would have come up with some sort of a little alliteration for you, you know? You would have been like Jammin' James Porter, or like Jive Jimmy Porter, you know? He would have come up with something.
Yeah, the thing about Marvel and DC for me, it's like, they humanized, the people, behind those comics. So when you read the letter section of like a Marvel comic, it wasn't kind of like I've said to you before. It's like, it wasn't coming from some 7-year-old who really did think that the Mighty Thor existed someplace. Mr. Mighty Thor, I love your comics. Please send more.
Yeah. It
was always like somebody be like, oh wow, Jack Kirby drew a really great illustration in issue number 33 or whatever, those things like that. And reading that at like 9 years old, it made me feel really grown.
Yeah.
I didn't just buy like the superhero comics. I bought like the more lighthearted cartoon comics, like Tweety and Sylvester and all that stuff.
Yeah.
From like, Gold Key and Charlton, they had like the Flintstones and Fat Albert and Bugs Bunny and all that, right?
Yeah.
I love those comics as well, but those guys just anonymous people who cranked out the comics just for the kids, and they did. And a lot of times that stuff was like 20 years old, and you wouldn't even know it unless you looked in the copyright at the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel did that too, but they were a little slicker. They would tell you that, if you read a story and then at the bottom it said, formerly appeared in Marvel Tales number 33. Yeah, and things like that. I mean, those little things, I was really into that world between ages 8 and ages 11, and then rock and roll kind of won the battle, and, comics have been kind of like a strange cousin to me, but I still kind of respect it from a distance,
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Yeah, that's absolutely the truth. I can dig it. Well, we're gonna have to wrap up because unfortunately this device only lets me record a little bit at a time. Which sometimes is handy because we could probably talk for hours. But is there any?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah.
Anything you got to plug? I'd just like to say that I think your show is fantastic. I'm a big fan.
Hey, thank you.
I look forward to it every month. It's always a great time. And
that's right. It comes on once a month, third Saturday every month from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
That's it. Right on, man.
Yeah.
Right on. You got anything else?
WLUW.org.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I always listen online, of course, because I'm all the way down here. But it's
sure.
cool, man. It's cool to know that you're in there, and I can hear the excitement in your voice as you're going through the records and doing the thing. It's really cool, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. As with my writing, I can't really act like an detached observer.
Yeah, I dig it, man.
Yeah.
I totally dig it. All right, James, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
You got it. We'll meet again.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right.
All right.